Hello and welcome to Creating Disciples with me, Austin Roberts. We are so excited to have you join us today as we are going to be taking a look at a psalm. Now, the Psalms are important to us because they are from the Psalter, the Psalms, the book of songs for the ancient Israelites. And although they were written many hundreds and even thousands of years ago, they still say important things to us today. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we hope the Lord blesses you through this message. My dad tells me a story that showed up in Insight magazine many, many years ago. Now, Insight magazine was the magazine, at that time at least, that was put out for Seventh-day Adventist young adults. And this story was published just at a time when many of the houses in the homes in the United States were just starting to get their own personal computers. So while this story may sound a little corny to us today due to our current technology, it was a story that was very relevant to them back then. You see, as the story goes, there was an office, and this office purchased a computer that was very, very powerful and that could do things just at the touch of a button, and it could complete many, many different tasks. Well, this computer inevitably began somehow to grow a mind of its own, and it began not to complete the tasks which it was asked to complete, and it began to do things on its own and not do things that the employees wanted it to do. And finally, they got fed up with it. And they tried to tell it to do things, and it wouldn't do these things, and it was just a problem. So finally, after one day, they told it to do something, and instead of doing what it was told to do, it printed instead the phrase, "I have all the," and then someone just reached over and pulled the plug. And the computer sputtered to a halt as it printed POWE. And then it was over. And that was it. The truth is, we would like to have power in our own lives. We would like to be able to go out and do our own thing and have our own power. In fact, speaking of power, I looked up the most powerful people in the world. Forbes magazine, almost every year since 2009, puts out a list of the top 10 most powerful and influential people in the world. So this is their list from 2018. Coming in at number 1 is Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China. Number 2, Vladimir Putin, the President of Russia. Number 3, Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America. Number 4, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany. Number 5, Jeff Bezos, the CEO and Chairman of Amazon. Number 6, Pope Francis, the leader of the Catholic Church and Pope of the Holy See. Number 7, Bill Gates, the co-founder of the Gates Foundation and the founder of Microsoft. Number 8, Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Number 9, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India. And finally, rounding out the list at number 10, Larry Page, the co-founder of Google. These people, these 10 in particular, have a lot of power. And the truth is, most of us don't yearn for that type of power, but most of us do want some power somewhere in our lives. You can imagine at work, for instance. You're working on this project with a group of people, and everyone is doing their best, working hard, putting in their part, but there's just that one person who's always late at the deadline, who doesn't do the greatest work, who kind of skips out on group meetings. And you just wish you had the power to say, listen, you put in or get out. You do the work you've been assigned, or you're no longer part of this team. Don't you wish you had that kind of power? Well, we all have power somewhere. Some of us have it at work. We're the boss. Some of us have it at home. Maybe you've got kids or younger siblings or somebody else you take care of. Maybe you've got it elsewhere. You're a teacher at school or the principal where you have to look over people. Maybe you manage a group at work or something. Maybe you're a physician and you have patients and nurses and resident physicians that you look over. We all have power somewhere. And the truth is, as good as some of us are at using that power, others of us are not always as good. And so the question I pose to you today is simple. Do you want to be in control? And if you're honest and you answer that question truthfully, I would guess that the answer to that would be yes. We all want to be in control. We all want to have more control than we currently have. Control is a nice thing to have. And today we're going to look at a text that talks about a little bit of that. I would like to invite you all to open with me to the book of Psalms, chapter 2. We're going to read Psalm 2 here in a few moments, and we're going to see a little bit about what control looks like. Now, before we read, I'm going to tell you a bit about this psalm. The truth is we don't know a ton about it. Psalm 2 doesn't have a byline, although many scholars do think that King David probably wrote it. We don't know that for sure, but it is possible. Another thing about this psalm is it is typically considered to be a psalm that prophesies the coming of Jesus. And if King David is the one who wrote it indeed, this would have been written years, hundreds, thousands of years even, before Jesus was born. Now, with all that in mind, and this context into which we step, let's read this psalm. We're going to begin with the first stanza. We're going to read Psalm chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. It says this: "Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, 'Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles.'" Now, if I needed to summarize this stanza in a phrase, in a few words, I would summarize it by saying, we will do it our way. Simple. We'll do it our way. We don't want help. We don't want you to control this. We will do it our own way without anybody else putting any work into this. We'll do it our way. Now, that is, at times, a familiar feeling. We'll do it our way. For those of you who are parents, or for those of you who are aunts or uncles or grandparents or know what it's like to be with small children, you know what that's like. Eventually those small kids get to an age where they learn the word no, or they learn the word me. And that's all they say. They want to do it their way. Me, me, me. No, no, no. Don't help me. I'm going to do this. Leave me alone. Let me do it my way. We'll do it our way. Joseph LeConte, a scholar at King's College in New York, who has done a lot of research on World War I, tells the story of the last casualty in World War I, the final person to die. His name was Henry Gunther, and he died on November 11, 1918 at 10:59 a.m., exactly 1 minute before the armistice, the last casualty to die in World War I. And you see, Gunther wanted to do it his way. And for him, it ended tragically in death. You see, the Allied troops had come upon a German outpost, and Gunther had been ordered by his commander to stand down and to do nothing. But Gunther decided that he was going to charge the Germans with his bayonet. And so that's what he did. And the Germans, just like the Americans, were aware that the armistice was coming. And so they tried to wave him down, saying, no, 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 don't do it. But he would not be deterred. He continued to charge with his gun and his bayonet. And so they had no choice in the end, and they gunned him down. Let me do it my way. I don't want your help. I want control of this situation. And sometimes it's almost like a small child. Let me do this my way. Leave me alone. Michael Giglieri, author of Over the Edge, Death at the Grand Canyon, wrote this book where he talks about many of the deaths that have happened there at the Grand Canyon, 700 nearly, since the 1870s. And of course, most people aren't shocked that fatal mishaps occur there. After all, the Grand Canyon is 277 miles long, up to 18 miles wide, and attains a depth of over a mile, which is over 6,000 feet. The extreme temperatures, which often exceed 100 degrees during the day, can quickly lead to heat stroke and dehydration. So Giglieri asks, how did most of these deaths occur? Air crashes account for the largest number of deaths at the Grand Canyon. Floods have claimed the lives of some other river rafters. Other despondent souls, sadly, have taken their own lives. But according to Giglieri, a number of people have gone over the edge and fallen to their death through their own carelessness. Specifically, they ignored posted warnings and confidently walked out to dangerous precipices. For example, in 1992, a 38-year-old father jokingly tried to frighten his teenage daughter by leaping onto a guard wall. He flailed his arms as he pretended to lose his balance. Then he comically fell on the canyon side onto a ledge he assumed was safe. But sadly, after ignoring numerous warning signs, he lost his footing and fell 400 feet into the void below. Then in 2012, an 18-year-old woman who was hiking on the Northern Trail decided to venture off the beaten path to have her picture taken at a spot known as Inspiration Point. As she sat down on the ledge of the 1,500-foot deep canyon, the rocks gave way, and she plummeted to her death. We will do it our way. We don't want your help. We will ignore your signs. Just give us some control and don't tell us what to do. And not every time you ask for control or try to take it does it end up in death. But doing so can be dangerous, especially in a situation like the Grand Canyon, where it is beautiful and wonderful, but also dangerous in many parts. So that's the first stanza. We'll do it our way. We want control. We don't want your help. Almost like a child. Me, me, me. No, no, no. Just let me do this the way I want to do it. I don't need you. I don't want you. But that's just the beginning. Then we move to the next stanza. Psalm 2, verses 4 to 6 this time. And this is going to be a bit of a rebuttal. So let's read what it says, starting at verse 4. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Now, if I had to summarize that stanza, I would probably summarize it by God saying, I have a plan. So first we start. We'll do it our way. Then God responds, I have a plan. And it doesn't take much to know whose plan is better. Ken Sand tells a story, the author Ken Sand, of seeing a visually impaired woman with her guide dog. As Sand tells it, the woman was walking along a sidewalk, jogging in fact, doing her exercise one day with her dog. And as she was walking on this sidewalk, Sand noticed that in one of the driveways that she was walking by, a car had pulled out. And it wasn't moving, it was stopped, but it was sticking out into the sidewalk. And so to get around it, she would have to go around a bit. She couldn't just walk straight through. Well, of course, the dog saw this. And so the dog stopped. And the woman commanded the dog to go because no doubt this was a place in the road where she was not used to having to turn. She knew this was wrong. But the dog pressed up against her leg and tried to push her out into the road to go around the car. But the woman persisted, No doubt she typically trusted her dog, but this time she thought she knew better. And she persisted, and once again she commanded the dog to go. And the dog would not. Again, the dog pressed up against her side, tried to get her to move, but nothing. And finally, after pressing up against her side one more time, trying to get her to move, she got exasperated, upset, and she gave the dog a kick, and then on her own began to march forward. And it only took her about a step or two until she ran straight into the car. And there she reached out, she felt it, and she realized what was out there. And immediately, Sand says, she was filled with remorse. She dropped to her knees in tears and spoke to the dog and said, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened. You were right. You had a plan." And isn't that true of God? So often we want to do it our own way. We want to just blaze on forward, just continue to move. And God says, this might feel like the right way to go. This might feel like the way forward, but it's not. And he tries to push us to the side a little bit and move us here, move us there. And God says no. And even though we persist, we try to push forward, we try to blaze through, God knows the way. And we are often blind to God's plans and his ways. So obviously, the question comes up, well, what is the plan? And for that, let's continue to read. We'll read the next stanza, Psalm 2, verses 7 to 9. And the psalmist writes, "I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery.'" So once again, if the first stanza was, we'll do it our way, with our stubbornness, and God's response is, I have a plan. The third stanza, I think God says what his plan is. He says, my plan is my son. So we'll do it our way, and then he responds by saying, I have a plan. My plan is my son. Now, like I've already mentioned, this psalm was likely, although not certainly, written by David. And when he wrote this would have been thousands of years before Jesus was born. And he would not have known the name Jesus. He would not have known what was coming. But because he was inspired by God, he writes this psalm anyway. And you can see it in there. You can feel the messianic theme. You know Jesus is coming. And he writes about the Son who will come to seek and to save the lost, who is coming for you, coming for me, and is coming for everybody in between. He is coming. But there is some interesting imagery in this stanza. We'll read it there again. It says, I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. What does that mean? Well, the Bible Knowledge Commentary helps us kind of decode this language, what this means. You see, back during that time when the pharaohs of Egypt would conquer a land or quell a rebellion, they would have their scepters. And with their scepters, they would break these small pieces of pottery to signify that they had won. So they would take their scepters and they would break this pottery. And it was a show of force and it was a show of power. But God is not a man of force and using his power to strong-arm people one way or the other. You see, even though it says that in the text, I believe God to be a God of love and mercy. And he is saying, listen, my plan is my son. You don't have to do this. You don't have to follow. But trust me, God says, it's a better plan than the plan you have. And so, when we are motoring away, God pulls the plug. And he does so gently. He doesn't strong arm us. He doesn't push us around. He doesn't make us follow him. But he just pulls the plug ever so gently and says, listen, I've got a plan. All you have to do is follow. And that then brings us here to our final stanza, as he pulls his plan by sending his son. So let us read the last few verses, verses 10, 11, and 12. The psalmist writes this: "Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss his son, or he will be angry, and your way will lead to destruction. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him." So if the first stanza is humanity saying, we'll do it our way, leave us alone, we don't want your help, let us have control. Then the second stanza is God responding and saying, I have a plan. And the third stanza is him saying, my plan is my son. Then the fourth and final stanza is God saying, surrender and live. You see, you can't live without changing. You must surrender to live. And in God's plan, he makes it easy. Or I should say, he makes it simple. It's not always easy, but it's simple. He says, just surrender to me, and you will live. Fast Company magazine published an article entitled Change or Die. The article says, what if you were given that choice? What if a well-informed, trusted authority figure said to you that you had to make difficult and enduring changes in the way you think and act? If you didn't, your time would end soon, a lot sooner than it had to. Could you change when change really mattered, when it mattered most? According to the articles, the odds are 9-1 that you will not change, even in the face of certain death. The author based that statistic on a well-known study by Dr. Edward Miller, the dean of the medical school and CEO of the hospital at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Miller studied patients whose heart disease was so severe that they had to undergo bypass surgery, a traumatic and expensive procedure that can cost more than $100,000 if complications arise. About 600,000 people have bypasses every year in the United States, and 1.3 million heart patients have angioplasties. The procedures temporarily relieve chest pains, but rarely prevent heart attacks or prolong lives. Around half of the time, the bypass grafts clog up in a few years, the angioplasties in a few months. The causes of this so-called restenosis are complex. It's sometimes a reaction to the trauma of the surgery itself, but many patients could avoid the return of pain and the need to repeat the surgery, not to mention alter the course of their disease before it kills them by switching to a healthier lifestyle. Yet very few do. Dr. Miller summarized his research on patients' inability or unwillingness to change their lives by saying this: if you look at people after coronary artery bypass grafting 2 years later, 90% have done nothing to change their lifestyle. And so we're missing, and that's been studied over and over and over again. And so we're missing some link here. Even though they know they have a bad disease and they know they should change their lifestyle, for whatever reason they can't, or they don't. Following Jesus is simple as a concept. You surrender to him. You give away the control you so desperately yearn for and have grabbed for time after time after time. It's as simple as that. Now, don't get confused. Don't get it twisted, because it's not always that easy. In the same way, if you think of sports, if you think of a team, well, how do you win? Simple, you score more points. But it's not always that easy. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of practice during the week. It takes putting a game plan together. It takes everybody buying into the mission and the vision of the team. It takes everybody going to their spots, playing well, passing the ball around. So the concept is simple, to surrender and to live. But sometimes it's hard to follow, as evidenced by this article. It's hard for us to change. It's hard for us to make decisions that will change things for us. But that's the reality. And so once again, we yearn for control ever so desperately. As stanza number 1 says, we'll do it our way. We don't want your help. Like the small child that says, no, 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 me, let me do this. I don't want you to help me. Give me control. But then God comes back and he says, I have a plan. It's not your plan, but believe me, it's a better plan. And that plan has a name. And that plan's name is Jesus. And that may be tough, but it's a plan worth following. So surrender and live. So as you go today into your individual lives, I don't know where you need to surrender. I don't know what things hold on to you. I don't know what things or where, in what places you want control. But maybe it's time to make a change. And it's really a simple change. It's not a concept that's difficult to understand. The change is just to follow Jesus and to surrender your life to him. But it can be a tough change. It can be a hard change. So as you do that, and as you yearn and as you strive to be better people, may the Lord bless you and may he be with you as you walk this journey called life. He is with you every step of the way, even though it may not feel like it all the time. So surrender to him and live that life that you have been called to. May God bless you. May he keep you. And thank you so much for joining us today on Creating Disciples. We're thrilled you're here. We hope you have enjoyed this program, and we hope you continue to watch LLBN for this program and for the many others we put together. God bless and amen.